Welcome back to today's episode where we talk about the recent installments of a different series every show. Today we're talking about Knuckles, the show starring Idris Elba and Adam Pally. You watched all 6 episodes, but first I want to talk a little bit about rivalries. We've talked a lot about Nickelodeon and Disney shows
and
recently.
Quiet on Set in episode 4, they talked about how each one was competing against the other.
And how like Disney had a stranglehold and then Nickelodeon came along and they were like the anti-Disney.
And they started hiring people from different, from both of them.
Yes, but not only them. I want to talk about Sega versus Nintendo because obviously Sonic is Sega. Nintendo had this huge monopoly until the early 90s.
Yeah, right, because it was the 90s and then it was between those two. But then Sonic crossed over into Nintendo with Super Smash Bros. Brawl, right? They were able to get the rights for him.
Well, it's funny you say crossover because I learned today that Nickelodeon's Doug was bought by Disney in the mid-90s and like 100 episodes were produced by Disney. And even the movie later, closer to 2000, was produced by Disney. And there are a lot of fans split on whether or not it just jumped the shark when that happened. But it is weird how I haven't heard of any other cartoons that left from Nickelodeon and jumped into the Disney sphere.
Because usually they only stay, like even Hey Arnold, I think always stayed on Nickelodeon.
Yeah, I think they still have the rights to the first 4 seasons though. But getting back to Sonic, so 1991 happens and Sega is the company that's been around since like the 60s. Nintendo outdated them by like, I think, they were in like 1889 or something. They came along with
1889.
Yeah, they were card games originally.
Yeah, because
and
then
Sega was like arcade games. They used the quarter, and they were the ones who I think made it popular for people to go in and use a quarter every time. I forgot the name of the game, but it had something to do with submarines and shooting. They decided they wanted to get into video games. They saw Nintendo already had the lead. They released the Genesis, I think in 1990, 1991, but they realized they needed to compete with who? Mario.
Yes.
And so they said, we need our own character. They asked the entire company to come up with like different ideas. This one guy did. And then they built a team around him. And then they produced that for Japan. And then America got a hold of it and they said, we're going to rebrand it a bit. And then Sonic became Sonic.
My knowledge for Nintendo dates back really to the NES and then it became the SNES, Nintendo 64, GameCube. But by that point, even with the NES, I think Mario was already huge.
It was the SNES. I think they were just coming out with it. Nintendo was doing their big, it was a video game event, a Comic-Con sort of deal where they were just announcing it and Sega had kept Sonic a secret up until then. So SNES comes out and immediately they launch Sonic and they show how great it is because it's no longer the block games. It's more of like your character spinning through space and going and rolling through the atmosphere. Everybody knows who Sonic is basically what I'm trying to say. The other rivalries I wanted to mention were Doritos versus Cheetos, because I know that Doritos gets a lot of shout out in this series.
Cool Ranch Doritos. I was glad that...
Was it more than in just the first episode? Because admittedly, I only watched the first episode. You watched all 6.
He only names drops Cool Ranch Doritos in the first episode, but you see him eating it kind of throughout.
Okay, so it is branded.
Yes.
So I don't have to go looking up. Do you know which one came first, Doritos or Cheetos?
I would guess Cheetos.
Cheetos for sure. Yeah. I think Cheetos were either like the 40s and I think Doritos were like the 60s, but Cheetos might have been earlier. Sonic versus Knuckles, that's another rivalry because obviously that's how the second film went.
Right.
And what did you think of the Jim Carrey second film? Because
so I saw the first film like over a year ago and I thought it was fine. I thought it was enjoyable enough. The second one, not so much. I felt like it was a little full of itself. It's almost 2 hours long, which is longer than even the first one. And I thought that the plot got sidetracked a lot. However, I did like the marketing of the second Sonic film because if you remember the trailer back in like 2023, it only gave away like the first 25 minutes of the film.
Mm-hmm.
So even though I didn't like the second Sonic movie, watching it, I was glad that I was like kind of surprised by what I was seeing because the trailer really didn't give away that much.
And I love the second movie. For a kid's movie, I think it was great. Compared that to the Spiderwick Chronicles movie that we had seen just a few weeks earlier to go over that series. And Sonic, first of all, the animation style. Secondly, the hybridization of having, like, it feels like that's gotten better over time. Look at the things that we've had. So Who Framed Roger Rabbit really set the standard for how good it could be. And then Space Jam came in, which is definitely people either love it or hate it, right?
I love it. I mean, that was like my favorite film.
How about the second one?
The second Space Jam I thought was awful.
Okay, some people love that. Like the audience's scores for both of those are actually, I think the second one has a higher audience score, but their Rotten Tomato score is much worse. And then earlier this year we did Ted, which Does Knuckles and Ted have any similarities?
I mean, not that I
They're the same
think
size.
of. They're both in a sequel, I guess. I should say I did like Knuckles in the second film. I thought he was the best addition to the
I think
series.
Idris Elba's voice coming out of him, and even my favorite moment from the first episode of the series is when Kid Cudi says his line from the first movie
Yeah,
or from
right.
the second movie. Yeah. Paddington is another hybridization of them. Marcel the Shell. All of those are good ones. Can you name any bad hybridizations? Because there certainly are a bunch of them. I remember the Looney Tunes movie with the guy from The Mummy, Brendan Fraser.
Oh,
that
yeah.
came out. That wasn't that great. But did you know that the first live action hybridization was back in 1900, produced by Thomas Edison? It was like a short 2-minute clip. You can watch it on Wikipedia, actually. And it shows this guy drawing just a man, a kind of a drunk, and he's like drawing beverages for him. And then he's pulling those beverages with stop motion, out of the pitcher and then drinking it himself.
I didn't know that there was a specific moment when that happened. Like there was a specific film that kind of
there was a first?
Yeah, because it just seems like it was. I mean, again, I was born in the late '90s, but it seemed like it was always kind of getting better and better and better.
All right, we're working our way up to talking about the show, but the other rivalry I want to mention is Emeralds versus Infinity Stones. Which are more powerful?
Well, Infinity Stones, obviously.
I don't think so. I think that the debate is up and ripe for debate. Right? Because when Sonic uses all the emeralds to become supersonic, like he's unbeatable, right? He's
Yeah,
old
but I mean,
Sonic,
Thanos is unbeatable as well. He was able to wipe out half the
I mean, they beat
universe
Thanos. They literally beat Thanos.
by having to go back in time.
And they almost pulled off his gauntlet several times. I think that he's more weak with all the Infinity Stones than we sound like we're raging in Nerdville right now. But yeah, so we talked a little bit about Sega's history. This is Knuckles, the series, new miniseries.
I never
Paramount Plus.
I never saw the trailer for it. I only heard the title and I saw a poster for it. But you expect, even with the title, for maybe it to be a prequel, something involving Shadow possibly, who they hinted at the end of the second film, or a different emerald maybe that Knuckle needs to get. The weird thing is,
other than the emerald,
the strange thing, Wade needs to win a bowling tournament. That's what Knuckles has to do in this series.
Yeah, so it's okay. So you've seen that documentary Now episode. Fred Armisen, Bill Hader. They produced Michael C. Hall and Bobby Moynihan.
Episode,
and there was someone else, but they were all like fighting to become the best bowler. And it was a fake documentary, obviously. And it just showed how ridiculous people get into it.
For the first thing that I thought of was strangely the Kingpin movie. The movie that came out in the 90s starring like Woody Harrelson and I think Bill Murray. It talks about bowling and it's basically them trying to who's going to win the bowling competition.
It's a real sport. I don't want to knock anybody who's really into bowling. However, it is kind of funny when you put your entire life towards like that goal of being the best bowler when like a lot of people, like normal people, can get and do a perfect game. That's pretty available over time because you can go in there and train every single day. Am I wrong?
No,
I've never done one
sure.
myself, but I think getting 300, if that's a perfect game, is pretty possible.
I think I got 300 once on the Wii bowling thing.
Oh, on the Wii bowling. Wii, again, Nintendo.
But the first episode, it deals with Chief Pachmak. I think that he's a character from the actual game. He tasks Knuckles with having to help Wade for the Tournament of Champions.
Yeah, and the Chief is obviously the guy from Michael Fox's movie Christopher Lloyd. Yes.
Oh.
Yeah.
It's a secret organization though called Gun that is also trying to find Knuckles. And
I liked Gun. I
you like Gun? You like the two people?
It reminded me a lot of the Umbrella Academy. The beginning where Hazel and Cha-Cha were going after Five. You remember that?
It reminded me a lot of Umbrella Academy too, because there is that fight scene in both this also echo a little bit.
At the beginning of the first episode.
Well, at the end of the first episode when they're in the bowling alley.
That's what I'm talking
about. And they're trying to fight each other. I thought that was actually, after seeing the rest of the series.
I love that line. Again, Kid Cudi presenting the, does it look like I need your power? Like, that was just such a funny callback to me. Yeah.
But I think that was probably the best action scene that the series had.
That's disappointing.
Yeah, no, I know. So that kind of, because the first 3 episodes I watched, I was thinking to myself, okay, this is probably going to be on my worst of year list.
Whoa. Worst of?
Yes, worst
After
of.
the first 3, but that includes the first one. And the first one wasn't that bad. The first one included a golden retriever, the same golden retriever.
Ozzy.
Played by a different golden retriever because it's like now white, but it was still funny. And then what else was I going to say? Oh, and then Knuckles gets trapped at the end of the episode. And Adam Pally looks like he's going to have to free Knuckles Knuckles. I assume that happens rather quickly.
Yes,
right?
it happens in the second episode. The first one was the best because it also had Ben Schwartz's Sonic and
Yes, yeah,
Tails. So again, the most happens in that episode, but really it's paper thin after the first episode because you get to the second one, all that happens is Wade has a plan on breaking Knuckles out of where he is because he's being held by Mason and Willoughby. That's the name of the agents.
Yes.
And then he does so. He just is able to break Wade out with the...
But they also remind me a little bit of Kronk and that evil lady.
Relationship,
yes, but in what? In The Emperor's New Groove. Yeah. So the reason why that is because they are inadequate or they're unable to do what
they're
need to
just
do.
kind of bumbling idiots. But I thought that the way that Mason and Willoughby was written, they were the most cliche, irritating characters to follow.
I'm sorry, pause.
Yes.
Dr. Eggman isn't?
Dr. Eggman
is not a cliche.
Jim Carrey's Dr. Eggman is great. I think that if you talk to anyone, they will say that he is a highlight performance in the first two films.
But he is the exact version of a villain, like the most villainy villain that you can get.
Mason and Willoughby are more cliche than Dr. Eggman is. And Dr. Eggman is also from the games. I don't think that Mason and Willoughby, I don't think Gun Agent is even part of the actual Sonic canon.
Okay, keep going.
So they are able to break out Knuckles. And then the third episode is Wade. He brings Knuckles to his family. That's where we see that Wendy is his mom. We have Wanda, who is Wade's annoying, I think, younger sister. And she
would be older. I would. She's actually older. She's like 49, and I think Adam Pally's early 40s.
She works for the FBI, and
you saw her in Righteous Gemstones.
Oh, that's where I would know her from. Okay, yeah. So then Wendy, she invites Knuckles to a Shabbat dinner because their family is Jewish, and then much like the second episode, people are able to track down where Knuckles is. There's a huge fight scene where they destroy the house, but everyone survives. They're able to knock out all the bad guys, and I don't know why they don't leave because by the beginning of the fourth episode, they are still at that same house.
So it sounds like there's plot holes.
Yeah, well, there are huge plot holes. Also, it felt like it was brain rot. In the third episode, they have Hava Nagila in the back while a fight scene is going on. It just seemed like it was just trying to throw anything at the screen.
There was a lot of music.
Sick.
But, like, the music is supposed to be a selling point. Even the first episode is called The Warrior, and I think Warrior is the song that they keep playing at the beginning, and then in the middle when Adam Pally Wade has the weight that he's almost strangling himself with, and then at the very end for the action sequence, they do it. I think the fourth episode, that's the Shabbat one, right?
No, the third episode is the Shabbat
third one. It may be the fourth one, I think, that Yorma Taccone actually directed.
I think I saw his name, when they were doing the
So there's
intro.
A lot of comedy in there, so I would think that the plot stuff is supposed to be like so much less important than...
Here's the thing. If it was actually funny, this isn't just like TV PG, even though it might be rated that. This is TV Y7 level humor. The best people that were in the show up in episode 5 and 6, Rob Hubel and Paul Scheer as ESPN announcers. Their banter in the series is funnier than anything that is said by any of the characters. And the first 3 episodes can trick you into thinking that since it's called Knuckles and since it features Knuckles a lot, that he's going to be the main character. But 4, 5, and 6, that's around an hour and 25 minutes. No, that's the runtime. How often, because I timed it, do you think that Knuckles shows up in it?
I don't know.
For a combined total, he shows up for 13 minutes and 57 seconds, including him being knocked out in the background of the final fight for close to 3 minutes, close to 21.5% of his screen time. This thing becomes fully about Wade, and I don't understand why, if you're trying to get a younger audience, because this is, again, a family thing, it's even, I'd say, lighter than the movies, why you would want to focus on Wade when Knuckles is the reason that you're watching this series in the first place.
That's a grievance that I understand. They were doing the third movie at the same time, the production for it, and that's why there are Easter eggs for the third movie.
That's probably the reason why James Marsden, I was sad to see he didn't show up in the first episode.
I think he was busy with jury duty.
From that.
But Knuckles may have been pulled away.
In the fourth episode, well, yeah, it's funny you say that because in the fourth episode, Knuckles gets 1 minute of screen time. That's what I mean by he has so little in the actual series. Wade gets kidnapped by Jack the Bounty Hunter, who we see in the first episode. He's the person that takes Wade's jacket away and makes him not able to be in the bowling circuit. But then he meets Pachacamac in a dream sequence because there is a bounty out for Wade's head that's shown at the end of the second episode, and he's just stuck in like this jail cell at the back of a truck. So then we get a musical sequence, as you can imagine, and we don't get any Knuckles. We get instead Wade in a jacket that's supposed to look like Knuckles while they're doing this
Oh, I know
really
what. Yeah,
cringy,
yeah, I saw that picture.
hokey. Yeah, they're doing this really cringy, hokey, like backstory song about how Knuckles ended up losing his father and then ended up beating a demon because he just had to believe in himself. Michael Bolton shows up for a minute, but it's not even funny because it's not him, it's his voice. And it's like, what am I watching? This is just crazy right now.
I mean, okay. It doesn't. I want to defend the show at this point. It doesn't seem that bad. For a kid's show, are you telling me if you were 5 years old right now and you were watching this, you wouldn't find the fun part of the animation,
I
just
want
the
to
wonky
see
characters?
Knuckles. I would want to see
Yeah.
Knuckles. It's called that, and I don't understand why in the
I
fourth
felt like in the
episode.
first episode, though, you did get enough Knuckles, Sonic, Tails. And Tails is someone I want to speak about because whenever Tails speaks in this series, everybody else is like a Hollywood actor that they got on or someone
Yes,
who's worked in
right.
television. But Tails is just like Miss Minutes in Loki, where they're an actual voice actress who has voiced this person beforehand, and you can tell. Like as soon as they start speaking, it's like, oh, that is a cartoon.
Higher pitched voice, yeah.
Yeah, maybe it's that. Maybe it's just the fact that it's higher pitched.
Also, but I'm not sure if you got this from the first episode. Didn't it seem, and I know that this didn't have the budget of a summer blockbuster, but didn't it seem like Knuckles and Sonic looked way more CGI to you?
No, in fact, people have said the opposite. They've said that they look exactly like they did in the movies. Maybe when you watched on Paramount Plus, it just didn't come across that well. But it is funny because I would think that because it's on Paramount Plus distinctly, that's probably going to make it reach less of an audience than it normally would have. I think if it was on Disney, kind of like how Sonic originally was, you had to buy the Genesis to watch it.
Mhm.
I don't know how many people are rushing to subscribe to Paramount Plus, especially with what's going on with them. I think their CEO is about to step down. Do you know anything about echidnas, by the way?
Echidnas? No,
Yeah.
I mean, that's what Knuckles is.
Yes, but do you know how old they are? Just like real echidnas? Because they're
No.
also called spiny anteaters.
I wasn't sure if it was an actual thing.
Yes, they look like they're somewhere between a hedgehog and the spiny anteater and a platypus. I think they're the second lowest body temperature animal that's a mammal other than the platypus. And they've been around for 20 to like 50 million years. We can't even center in closer on a date for that. So they're older than humans are. What do you think the babies are called? They're either called Knuckles, Yuckles, Puggles, or Bubbles.
Puggles, I'll go with.
Puggles is correct, yes. What came first, Waluigi or Knuckles?
I would say Knuckles, right?
Knuckles is correct because Waluigi didn't come around till I think 2001. The interesting thing about how they're bringing the characters in, though, is like Tails didn't come in until the second game.
And he didn't show
come
up
in
until the second movie. Right.
Kind of similar with Knuckles himself because he kind of showed up right before the third game or during that third game. And that's exactly what they're doing here. So it feels like everybody's been a part of this. It's also been a part of the movies. It seems like they've tried to put a little bit of love into it. I didn't know anything about the comic books that came out at the same time.
I didn't know it was a comic either.
Yes, they even interacted with Riverdale and Sabrina. There's a comic book where Sonic and Sabrina are both hanging out. That's what I learned. Okay.
That reminds me of when like Katie Keene and the Punisher had a crossover
Exactly. No,
comic.
people compare it to stuff like that. But the most Knuckles search thing still on the internet right now is Ugandan Knuckles. Believe it or not.
That meme died like 5 years ago.
Yes, of course.
And,
All right.
and then like it turns out that, so Wade believes in himself. He's able to shoot out of the jail cell that's in the back of the truck. And then Jack Sinclair and him have a duel where Wade is on a tiny little kid bike and Jack Sinclair is on a motorcycle.
And you're saying when Jack Sinclair, actually when the little kid in the first episode was insulting him, that didn't remind you of like Dodgeball, where like the kids group were going after the gym, older gym players?
It did, but Jack Sinclair I didn't find to be funny at all. He has a very, very hokey scene where after Wade is able to knock him off of the motorcycle, he starts like crying and running away, and then that's after Wade like kind of strips off his jacket, his token, aka to get to the bowling tournament. Again, Knuckles is in like 1 minute of that episode. It's not any better when it gets to the fifth episode where he's only in it for like less than 5 minutes because they make it to Reno, Nevada, where By the way, for a show that's main goal is Wade having to win this bowling tournament,
Yes.
he doesn't do any practicing throughout any of the episodes.
Oh,
What you see
well,
in
no,
the
you saw in the first episode.
No, you saw in the first episode, but he doesn't practice at all. It seems like if Knuckles was tasked with having to help Wade actually do some bowling, you would see bowling happen.
I think it's saying that his talent was already inherently in him. He just needed to do some help bringing it about. He needed that confidence.
Well, anyways, you get Cary Elwes, and I was happy to see him, but you always know he's going to be evil. The show made
was
it
evil?
clear. Yeah, he's the dad of Wade. And so he ends up being evil at the end of the episode. He just wants Knuckles because both of them are in the championship, and he's kidnapped Wendy and Wanda, and in exchange for Knuckles, he will let them go. That's where the 5th episode ends. Again, this is a lot about Wade. And then in the 6th episode, that's when finally Knuckles has a fight scene at the very beginning where Mason and Willoughby, they're also where Pistol Pete is, but they have a fight scene, and using the rings, Knuckles is able to transport them into a different dimension. They get kind of like sucked in, like a vacuum.
The thing that annoys me about this second film was that Sonic did drop a lot of those rings. And so it left also the hair, because that's how they fight Knuckles, is because his hair, they have a bunch of his little red hairs.
Yes, right.
And you have the Hound guy who's like after them, and he's the one who's like using them against them.
Yeah,
right?
the buyer is what the Hound guy is called.
Yeah, and so like maybe they should just pick up after themselves, after these fights, maybe turn around, pick up your spare hair. It's glowing in the dark, so that should be pretty easy to find, and no one can take it from you then. And then also the same thing with the rings. Like if you lose one of those things, people can go wherever they want.
Well, it's funny that you bring up the hair, because they put it inside a massive glove that they drop in the first episode. That's how Wade is able to get them, because at the end of the episode, he ends up winning the I was going to say basketball, the bowling tournament against his dad. But then the buyer is in this big mechanical suit. It reminds me a lot of the Amazing Spider-Man Rhino suit.
Paul Giamatti.
Yeah, but it's obviously not him. And then you have Knuckles. He goes out there. He's trying to fight the buyer. The buyer kind of kicks his butt. And then it turns out that Wade goes out there with
what it
the
actually
giant...
reminds me of Iron Man 2, where what's-his-face uses the Iron Man suit against Iron Man, right? What's-his-face like has the whips of
You're talking about Mickey Rourke's character.
Yeah, he builds that stuff up with the same technology that Iron Man uses and then whips him with it.
Yeah, but the weird thing is that, again, it's being used with hairs. Magical hairs are the thing
that was literally what Jim Carrey used to...
No, I understand it. But then Wade, he goes out there and he starts giving this monologue about how Knuckles has taught him so much throughout the entire journey, like how to fight, which he doesn't do. We never see him do that. How he saved him from villains, which we only see him do in like the 2nd and 3rd episode. The whole monologue didn't make a lot of sense. And then it turns out that, yeah, Wade is actually able to beat the giant buyer.
Okay, what's your ultimate rating for this?
3 out of 10.
3 out of 10. Okay, you were not the target audience.
It's just
it has a 6.1 on IMDb. It is generally favorable reviews. It seems like most of the critics are pretty okay with it. Some are very happy with it. Collider is more in your camp, where they're just like, it kind of loses steam over time.
It's not that it loses steam. Yeah. The story is so bland. Why is it called Knuckles and we follow Wade the whole entire time? We barely get any Knuckles in the entire series.
And that's your main complaint, and I get it. But like, again,
it's not just that, because you have Mason and Willoughby. They are boring characters as well. The buyer, we only get to see kind of him being a villain at the very end of the last episode. Wanda and Wendy, they don't go through any character change, and that it can also be said for Knuckles and Wade. All the characters stay exactly the same as they were at the beginning of the series.
So overall, you think that the show stalled. Are you going to check out the 3rd movie?
Well, yeah, probably, because I like the first one enough where I'm actually have interest in it.
But a 3 out of 10 sounds like you're about to bail.
There was some things that I liked about the show. It had a surprisingly good soundtrack, among other things. They have I Need a Hero.
The same guy who did Shrinking did the soundtrack.
Yeah, well, they had I Need a Hero in the 2nd episode. Good Morning from Sound of Music. Damn, It Feels Good to Be a Gangster. The last time I heard that song was in Office Space, and even some Elton John. So I was surprised how much I like that. I also still like Idris Elba. I just don't think that this was a strong show.
Yeah, 3 out of 10. Thanks for listening. We'll see you on the next episode. Hope you enjoyed this one. Bye.